There are days when life seems to work perfectly. You wake up, work, fulfill your obligations, interact, smile, but suddenly something crosses your chest. A feeling of emptiness, an unnamed restlessness, a weight that has no clear origin, and you wonder, why am I feeling like this if it's all right? Heidegger would call it ontological anguish, and no, it is not a common sadness nor a passing psychological problem. It is the moment when something inside you realizes that you are living in automatic mode, away from your essence. This anguish does not have a specific object. It is not like fear, which has identifiable cause. She is diffuse. She just comes up, and it bothers you. But, according to Heidegger, this is good, because anguish is the silent so-called existence, a sign that something within you wants more than working. You mean, she is uncomfortable, yes. But it is also an awakening, a sign that you are starting to leave everyday anesthesia, that perhaps for the first time you are about to meet. For Heidegger, the human being is not an isolated consciousness as philosophers thought before him. We are not a mind floating on a body or a being that inhabits the world as one who lives in a house. We are a being, no world, inseparable from the reality around us, dipped in it. This sounds simple, but it changes everything. It means that living is not just biologically existing. It is inhabiting the world with meaning, and that doesn't happen automatically. Most people live as if they are watching their own life from the outside. It reacts, consumes, performs tasks, but does not wonder why. It is physically present, but absent existentially. Living in the world without being aware of yourself is, for Heidegger, a form of forgetting being. That's when the routine swallows reflection, time accelerates, and everything becomes functionality. You do, but don't feel. You respond, but don't choose. You live, but it's not. This is the rupture point Heidegger proposes. Being in the world is more than existing in space. It is existing with conscience, presence, with responsibility for what you are. The question is, are you living from yourself, or just following the flow that pushes you? Have you noticed how easy it is to slide to autopilot? The days are repeated. The gestures become predictable. You wake up, take your phone, brush your teeth, wear the same expression to face the world. Deep down, it's working, but it's not living. Heidegger called this impersonally to exist. That's when we are no longer subject to our experience and just work like everyone else. It's the if you should do so. That is expected of me. You live that way. It is as if life passed you, but it doesn't happen to you. The choices are no longer choices. The desires dissolve into others' goals. The identity is diluted in papers. And why do we do that? Because it is comfortable. Because automatism is a defense against anguish. It is a way of anesthetizing existential restlessness. But this anesthesia charges expensive. She empties you. And over time, something in you begins to die. Will, creativity, inner truth. Heidegger would say that living in this state is to forget that existence is a project, something that must be built consciously and not just supported efficiently. The routine itself is not the problem. The problem is when it becomes a hiding place of who you could be. There is a kind of anguish that does not come from outside. It is not caused by a traumatic event, a disappointment, a loss. It comes from the bottom. It's silent, for no apparent reason, and so even more disturbing. Heidegger called this experience of ontological anguish. It is not a common emotion, such as fear or sadness. It is an existential sensation that emerges when the veil of distractions falls, when daily life loses its shine, when everything that used to make sense becomes strange. It is as if you suddenly open your eyes and no longer recognize your life. The house is there, the work continues, people are around, but something in you does not fit. The reality seems artificial. The papers you interpret seem false, and you realize you were living as if you were awake, but it was actually sleeping. Ontological anguish is the cry of being asking for space. It's like something inside you said, "Hey, that's not all. You're not all." But the world does not prepare us for this kind of confrontation. From an early age, we are trained to ignore the abyss, to respond to everything efficiently, positively, productivity. There is no place for anguish on the agenda. There is no time to question the meaning. And so, when it arrives, it disassembles us. But Heidegger saw an opportunity in this. Although uncomfortable anguish is the only way to authenticity, because it takes us out of the comfort zone and forces us to look into existence with raw eyes, no filters, without distractions. It tears the layers of the persona, the mask we use to look good, and reveals the urgency of a reunion with being. Anguish in this sense is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of lucidity. It is the beginning of the awakening, and only those who cross this desert begins to approach what it really is. The most common and more subtle to get lost is to continue to exist as if all are well, going to work, laughing at conversations, answering messages, taking care of the tasks, and at the same time, being completely disconnected from yourself. You keep working, but you are no longer inhabiting your own life. Heidegger calls this to live in the impersonal mode of if, a third-person existence. That's when you act as everyone acts, think what everyone thinks, wishes what everyone wants, follow the beaten trail, applauded, predictable, and believes this is normal, that this is to live. But this normality has a cost. In this way of being, you are no longer subject to your life and become a character of a collective script. You shape what society expects. Be productive, pleasant, successful, or functional, and the more you fit, the more you disappear. Because the if is comfortable but suffocating. It offers belonging but charges its authenticity. It gives you security but steals your freedom. And over time you forget who it is, or worse, begins to think you never knew. This escape of yourself is not conscious. No one wakes up and says, "Today I will leave myself." It is gradually built in. Daily concessions, in the silences you swallow, in the wills you advance, in the dreams you forget. The problem is that at some point the account arrives, and it comes in the form of crisis. Empty, existential tiredness, feeling of being lost even though it is surrounded by everything. Heidegger did not see this as a failure. He saw as a sign that the soul is trying to break the shell. The escape of if is human. But the choice to go back to you, this is the turn. Going out of impersonal. Mode is starting to ask difficult questions. What do I want? What makes sense to me? Who am I when no one is looking? And that's where existence is no longer a script, and it starts to be a date. Few themes paralyze us as much as death. We avoid talking about her, thinking about her, or even looking at her in the small signs of everyday life. A white hair, a persistent tiredness, news in the newspaper. We pretend it is distant, eventual. But Heidegger says the opposite. Death is the only certainty, and ignoring it is what prevents us from truly living. For him, only those who face death can exist in an authentic way, and that has nothing to do with morbidity. On the contrary, the consciousness of finitude acts as a snap, a brutal but necessary reminder that time is too short to be wasted living the lives of others. Heidegger calls this being to the death, a state of radical lucidity. You don't know the day or time, but you know it will happen, and that certainty should change everything. Most people live as if they had a contract with tomorrow. Postpone decisions. They postpone desires. Silence, uncomfortable. They live as if life are a draft, and time, an infinite resource. But real life has no essay, and time doesn't wait. When you become aware of death, you begin to ask yourself, what am I doing with my existence? What is I live is mine, or was it inherited, imposed, imitated? And this question, although uncomfortable, is the beginning of an inner revolution. Being to the death is not about living in fear, it is about living urgently. Urgency not to accelerate, but to stop wasting, to stop betraying, to stop postponing who you are. Death, for Heidegger, is not the end. It is the mirror. It is she who forces you to face life as it really is. A call to become who you are before it's late. Most live in repetition mode. Wakes up, fulfill tasks, responds messages, runs against the clock, sleeps exhausted, and starts over. There is movement, but there is no presence. There is agenda, but there is no conscience. It is as if we are constantly occupied but absent from ourselves. Heidegger calls this fall, verfallen, the state in which being is lost in distractions of the world, not because the world is bad, but because he is seductive. It offers endless forms of escape, social networks, opinions of others, commitments, entertainment, routines, and so the being dissolves. The fall is the oblivion of itself. It is the moment when existence becomes automatic, when you live but don't feel alive, when decisions look like yours but were scheduled, when the routine packs you and you don't even realize you stopped choosing. Heidegger does not condemn daily life. He warns of the risk of being swallowed by him. And here comes the key point. There is only liberation when there is perception. While you don't see, you repeat. But when you see the fall, it begins to seek elevation. This awakening does not happen in a miracle snap. It begins subtly, with a feeling of strangeness, a nuisance that grows, a tiredness that does not pass. And if you don't drown out with more distraction, it turns into a question. Is this life really mine? This is the beginning of the turn. It is the moment when consciousness begins to inhabit existence, where you stop living like everyone live, to live as you can. There is no formula for this. There is only the decision to stop, duty, to go back to you. Awakening for Heidegger is the return to being. And this return begins in the silence that the fall tries to silence. There comes a time when everything seems to collapse, meaning, papers, goals, even identity itself. Nothing satisfies, nothing fills. It's like the whole world is full, and you, empty. Heidegger called it calling from being, an uncomfortable whisper that begins when you stop distracted, when routine noise decreases and silence begins to speak. It is in this space that a question emerges, simple but devastating. Who am I besides all that told me I should be? This question does not come from the mind, comes from existence, and ignoring it has a price. Anguish grows, boredom becomes unbearable, existential tiredness settles. Because living without listening to the call of being is like living in a house where all windows are closed, safe but without air. Answering this call requires courage. Courage to unlearn, to break with papers that no longer fit, to disappoint those who expected another version of you, to face the abyss of not knowing and yet walking, because this is what Heidegger proposes to us. Existing is an act of radical courage. It is not simply being alive. It is inhabiting one's life with conscience. It is to choose, even without guarantees. It is carrying anguish without hiding. It is being, even if it means being different, strange, misunderstood. In the end, the call of being does not lead you to a certain destination. He pulls you out of the repetition and puts you on the road, the meeting road with yourself, where each step is choice, each gesture is presence, and every moment, it's real. This is Heidegger's proposal. Don't survive. Not only work. There is. In truth, living really is an act of silent rebellion in a world that insists on putting us on autopilot. It is to stop following ready scripts. It is giving up cheap certainties in exchange for depth. It is to accept that the existence is made of questions, not easy answers. Heidegger reminds us, to exist is to carry the anguish of being free. It is facing the discomfort of asking yourself every day, I'm being, or just living. And if you got here, you may have heard this call within you. Perhaps without realizing it, it has already begun to break the repetition cycle. Now I invite you, share this video with someone who needs to wake up to his own existence. Leave in the comments, when did you feel that you were just surviving and not living? Enjoy, subscribe to the channel and activates the bell. Here we don't sell easy answers, we cause questions that can change our lives. We see each other in the next deep dive.